and so this is a video where I'm going to be painting Grots. I really like goblins, and I have many, but I desire more. Therefore, when I paint goblins, I don't really want to fanny about with oils or anything. No, I want to smash these out about 10 to an hour. So, vaguely, that's what I tried to do here. In reality, it's a little bit closer to 6 an hour, but that's still very nice. Now, this is assuming you're painting in batches, which isn't for everyone, and that you've got a little bit of experience. But overall, I'd say it's very doable even for a novice painter. We open up with a nice black undercoat, for obvious reasons. Now, I have a small brain, so I undercoated these models with a glossier black paint than I should have. And it's worth noting that by and large, it can be easier to paint on a matte surface than on a glossy one. Anyway, we start off by overbrushing a bit of a charcoal colour over this. I'm using Eclipse Grey or possibly just a mix of white and black that I've made, and I'm being quite liberal with it. This is essentially the mid-tone for our cloth, so we really want to cover about 80% of the cloth this colour. Then we quickly dry brush on our highlight, which in my case I was using Arctic Grey, or again, maybe just a mix of white and black, but something similar to that tone. Personally, I don't like dry brushing very much, so the few times when I am doing this, I actually instead chose to highlight the cloth instead of overbrushing and dry brushing. If you choose to do this, the process is basically the same. Cover the vast majority of the model in your midtones, but when it comes to the highlights, I'd recommend a slightly darker grey. Now finally, to bring everything in line, we use some black wash. In this case, it's Citadel's Null Oil, and we just apply it over the black cloth. If you're highlighting instead, then I actually used a second wash as well, and I applied that as more of a glaze in to blur the transitions between the mid-tone and the shadow. With the black cloth done, it's time to move on to some details. Over everything that's not metal or skin, we want to apply a new base coat. I just use a regular mid-tone grey, like light grey from AK Interactive, and this is just to help with the coverage of some of the other colours. The wood gets a coat of a mid-tone brown. I just use a mix of burnt umber and dark sand, but really any light brown will work nicely. Then we want to add a little bit of visual interest by gently drawing on some wood grain. First I used a bit of black ink, and then I ended up using a light sand colour. Following this, we want a careful and relatively thin coat of Games Workshop Contrast Wildwood, and that finishes the look and gives the spear shafts a bit more of a textured feel to them, at least from far away. The cloth is simply AK Interactive Dark Sand, washed with Seraphim Sepia, and then I end in yellow contrast paint applied over the top. In any cases where the yellow was too bright or the recesses weren't dark enough, I applied a second coat of Seraphim Sepia. The metal consists of Vallejo Metal Colour Steel mixed 1:1 with Vallejo Metal Colour Silver. Once this was applied, I edge highlight it with dashes of Vallejo Metal Colour Silver. And in this case, I just applied the colour in dashes. And it means that when the spears catch the light, it gives the impression of a worn and roughly made metal. Finally, I applied a small amount of Contrast Black Templar, thinned 1:1 with medium, to darken the base of the spearhead, although a regular black wash would also be fine. We also apply the black wash onto the shields to help pick up all the little details of the bad moon face, and also to cover up any mistakes we might have made. Once that's dried, a carefully applied layer of Ayandan yellow contrast paint turns it into the sickly yellow gold that we're looking for. The skin is the real party of the model, and it's where we spend the most time. Vallejo Model Colour Refractive Green is beautifully covering mid-green, and it forms the basis of the skin. Over this, I applied Scale 75 Sherwood Green, and then Scale 75 Full Green in highlights. Scale 75 is a really great layering paint range, because the colours have a lot of transparency in them, and it helps build visual interest. A wash of Grelian Camoshade brings everything together, and then one last highlight of full green to really pop the skin. The final face details are just picked out in any off-white colour. The teeth are then shaded with Seraphim Sepia, and on the eyes I used a bright red to pick out the pupils. Following this, a final thin wash of Caribou Crimson was applied just around facial features like the mouth and the eyes, and that gives a little bit more life to the model. And there we are, the goblin is done. Like I said, when I timed it, it came out to be about 10 minutes per model when working in batches. I hope this has been useful for you. If you have any questions about the paint scheme, leave them down below and consider subscribing and leaving a like. I hope you'll join me next week when I'm going to be using a roller to make bases for my Stormcast.